The manager's voice cut through the crowded restaurant like a knife. Everyone turned as the young waitress stood frozen beside table 17, her hands still trembling from what had just happened. She had only stopped serving for a few minutes to help an elderly woman who could barely stand, but now her uniform was being taken away in front of dozens of customers. What the waitress didn't know was that the frail old woman sitting quietly in the corner was not an ordinary customer. She was the mother of one of the most powerful billionaires in the city, and within 24 hours, the decision to fire that waitress would change the restaurant forever. Before we begin this emotional story, if you believe kindness still matters, if you believe people deserve second chances, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs a little hope, leave a comment, and subscribe to Kindness Speaks. Your support helps us bring more stories about compassion, courage, and second chances. 24-year-old Elena had never imagined that kindness could cost her everything. She had worked at the elegant Riverside Grand for nearly 3 years, long enough to know which customers preferred quiet tables, which businessmen liked their coffee before breakfast, and which elderly guests needed a little extra patience. The restaurant was one of the most expensive in the city, decorated with crystal chandeliers, polished marble floors, and enormous windows overlooking the river. To wealthy customers, it was simply a place for dinner. To Elena, it was the place that paid her rent, bought groceries for her younger brother, and kept a roof over their heads after their father had passed away. Elena's life had never been easy. Her mother had died when she was 17, leaving her and her younger brother with very little. Instead of going to college, Elena began working wherever she could. She cleaned offices in the mornings, waited tables in the evenings, and studied online whenever exhaustion allowed her to keep her eyes open. She dreamed of becoming a nurse one day because she had always believed that helping people was more important than having money. But dreams were difficult to protect when rent was due and her brother needed school supplies. That rainy Tuesday evening began like any other. The restaurant was packed because a major business conference had brought hundreds of wealthy visitors into the city. Elena moved quickly between tables, carrying plates, refilling glasses, and apologizing whenever someone had to wait. Her manager, Victor, watched the staff from the front desk with the expression of a man who cared more about customer ratings than human beings. Around 8 o'clock, an elderly woman entered alone. She was perhaps 75 years old, dressed in a simple gray coat, with silver hair neatly pinned behind her ears. She carried a small handbag and walked slowly, carefully, as though every step required concentration. There was nothing about her appearance that suggested wealth. She did not wear expensive jewelry. She did not arrive with an assistant. She simply asked for a quiet table near the window. Victor almost ignored her because she was alone. Elena noticed immediately. She guided the woman to a comfortable table, pulled out the chair, and quietly asked if she needed anything. The woman smiled with tired eyes and said she would just like some warm tea and a bowl of soup. Elena brought both without making her feel rushed. For the next 20 minutes, the elderly woman sat quietly. Then Elena noticed something was wrong. The woman's hands began shaking. At first, Elena thought she was cold. Then the spoons slipped from her fingers and struck the floor. Several nearby customers glanced over but quickly returned to their conversations. Elena rushed toward her. The woman tried to stand, but her knees weakened. Elena caught her before she fell. The elderly woman looked frightened, embarrassed, and helpless. Elena immediately helped her sit down and brought a glass of water. She stayed beside her, gently asking if she needed medical assistance. The woman shook her head, explaining that she occasionally became weak and that she simply needed to sit for a moment. Elena didn't leave. She forgot about the tables waiting for their food. She forgot about the manager. She forgot about everything except the frightened woman sitting in front of her. Elena noticed that the woman's coat was damp from the rain. She took off her own cardigan and placed it around the woman's shoulders. Then she sat beside her until the shaking stopped. That was when Victor appeared. His face was red with anger. He looked at the dining room, then at the abandoned tables, and finally at Elena. He told her she had customers waiting. Elena explained that the woman had nearly fallen and needed help. Victor didn't care. He told Elena that the restaurant was not a charity, and that customers were paying hundreds of dollars for service. Elena calmly replied that the woman was a customer too, and that no meal was more important than someone's safety. Victor's anger grew. He ordered Elena back to work. She obeyed, but before leaving, she made sure the elderly woman was comfortable. 20 minutes later, disaster struck. A wealthy businessman complained that his table had waited too long. Victor blamed Elena. He marched her into the hallway and accused her of abandoning her responsibilities. Elena tried to explain. Victor didn't listen. In front of 2 other employees, he told her she was fired. The words seemed to echo through the hallway. Elena stood completely still. She thought about the rent due in 5 days. She thought about her brother's school fees. She thought about the electricity bill sitting unopened on the kitchen counter. She asked Victor for another chance. He refused. Then he told her to hand over her uniform. Elena walked into the staff room with tears burning her eyes. She changed clothes, packed her belongings into a small bag, and walked toward the exit. Before leaving, she looked through the dining room window. The elderly woman was still sitting at her table. Their eyes met. Elena smiled weakly. The woman smiled back. Neither of them knew how important that moment would become. Elena stepped outside into the rain. She walked home without an umbrella. By the time she reached her tiny apartment, her shoes were soaked and her face was wet with rain and tears. Her younger brother immediately noticed something was wrong. Elena didn't tell him everything. She simply said she had lost her job. Her brother hugged her. That night, Elena lay awake staring at the ceiling. She wondered whether kindness was a luxury that poor people could no longer afford. The next morning, she woke early and began searching for work. She sent applications to hotels, cafes, restaurants, grocery stores, and nursing homes. Everywhere she looked, employers wanted experience, references, or immediate availability. By afternoon, she had received 3 rejections. By evening, she had stopped counting. Meanwhile, across the city, the elderly woman from the restaurant was sitting in a private hospital room. And beside her stood a man whose name was known by almost everyone in the business world. Her son. His company owned hotels, technology firms, shipping businesses, and several luxury properties. Newspapers regularly described him as one of the youngest billionaires in the country. But he wasn't thinking about money. He was thinking about his mother. He had received a call that morning saying she had nearly collapsed the previous evening. He rushed to the hospital. His mother told him what happened. She explained that she had felt weak in the restaurant, and that a young waitress had immediately helped her. She told him how the waitress had given her water, covered her with her own cardigan, stayed beside her, and refused to leave even when the manager became angry. The billionaire listened silently. Then his mother asked him a simple question. He asked what it was. She wanted to know the young woman's name. Unfortunately, she didn't know. She only remembered that the waitress had worn a small silver bracelet and had a tiny scar near her left eyebrow. That was enough. The billionaire made one phone call. His assistant contacted the restaurant and asked for the employee records from the previous evening. Within an hour, they found Elena's name. Then they discovered something that made the billionaire furious. She had been fired for helping his mother. He immediately asked for the restaurant's security footage. The video showed everything. It showed Elena rushing toward his mother when she became weak. It showed her helping her into the chair. It showed Elena removing her own cardigan. It showed Victor angrily confronting her. And finally, it showed Elena leaving the restaurant alone in the rain. The billionaire watched the footage twice. Then he asked his assistant to arrange a private meeting with Victor and the restaurant owners. But he didn't stop there. He wanted to find Elena. The next afternoon, Elena received a phone call. She assumed it was another employer calling about her application. Instead, a polite voice asked if she could come to a nearby office for a meeting. Elena was nervous. She almost refused. But something inside her told her to go. When she arrived, she was taken into a quiet conference room. The elderly woman was sitting there. Elena froze. The woman stood slowly and walked toward her. Then she held Elena's hands. She thanked her. Elena immediately began crying. She explained that she hadn't done anything special. She said anyone would have helped. The elderly woman smiled sadly. She told Elena that unfortunately, not everyone would have. Then the door opened. Her son entered. Elena recognized him immediately. She had seen his photograph in newspapers. Her heart sank. She suddenly understood. The woman she had helped was his mother. Elena became frightened and apologized, thinking perhaps she had caused trouble. But the billionaire shook his head. He told her she had done the opposite. She had reminded him that kindness was worth more than money. He offered Elena her old job back. She respectfully declined. Not because she was angry, but because she wanted something different. She explained that she had always dreamed of working in healthcare. The billionaire looked at his mother. His mother smiled. Then he offered Elena something she never expected. He would pay for her nursing education. Not as charity. As a scholarship. Elena couldn't speak. She asked why. He told her that his mother had spent years teaching him that money could buy comfort, but it could never buy character. He said Elena had shown character when nobody was watching. The story did not end there. The restaurant owners learned what had happened. Victor was removed from his management position. The restaurant issued Elena a formal apology. But Elena never returned. Instead, she enrolled in nursing school. Years passed. She studied harder than she had ever studied before. She worked part-time while completing her education. Eventually, she became a nurse. And the elderly woman who had once sat alone beside the restaurant window became one of her biggest supporters. Every few months, she visited Elena at the hospital. Sometimes they drank tea together. Sometimes they simply sat quietly. Neither needed many words. Their friendship had begun on a rainy evening when one stranger chose to help another. Years later, Elena was working a night shift when she received a message that the elderly woman had been admitted to the hospital. Elena rushed to her room. The woman was weak. Elena sat beside her and held her hand. For the first time, the woman looked afraid. Elena reminded her that she had once been the frightened person sitting in a restaurant, and now it was Elena's turn to stay. The elderly woman smiled. She squeezed Elena's hand. And for a moment, the billionaire mother was no longer a billionaire's mother. She was simply an old woman being cared for by someone who had once cared for her. That night, Elena realized something she would remember for the rest of her life. Kindness had not made her life easier. It had made her life meaningful. She had lost a job because she stopped to help someone. But in losing that job, she had found a new purpose. She had discovered that sometimes the door that closes in your face is only closing because another door is waiting to open. And sometimes the person you help when nobody is watching may become the person who changes your entire future. If this story touched your heart, please don't just watch and move on. Like the video, share it with someone who believes that kindness still matters, and subscribe to Kindness Speaks for more emotional stories that remind us that one small act of compassion can change a life. And before we end, I have a special request for you. Comment. Kindness always comes back. If you believe that helping someone without expecting anything in return is still one of the most powerful things a person can do. Because Elena never knew that the old woman sitting quietly by the window was the mother of a billionaire. She didn't help her because she was rich. She didn't help her because someone important was watching. She helped because an elderly woman needed someone. And perhaps that is what true kindness really means. Doing the right thing when there is nothing to gain. Sometimes the world may not reward you immediately. Sometimes people may misunderstand you. Sometimes kindness may even cost you something. But never believe that kindness is wasted. Because somewhere, somehow, a simple act of compassion may be planting the seed of a future you cannot yet see. And Elena's story proved one unforgettable truth.